certain things in the 80s that deserve to be talked about. The first is the Creators' Bill of Rights. The Creators' Bill of Rights was a movement brought about by certain inequities in the business. Now, I'd like to begin by saying that almost all the issues on the Creators' Bill of Rights is a non-issue now today because of improved industry standards. It was brought about in light of the way former people were, the way superstar artists in those days were treated. Jack Kirby had to fight Marvel over 2,100 pages of art that he ended up receiving. Like, Jack Kirby's art was not returned to him. A lot of the Golden Age and Silver Age artists of Marvel did not have their work returned to them afterwards, after they had submitted it. In fact, some of the companies didn't know what to do with the art, so they would give it away. DC Comics, when Jack Kirby was working, Jack Kirby had a contract with DC Comics where he had to produce 15 pages of art a week. Most artists today manage a day's work per page. A day's work per page. Jack Kirby drew 15 pages a week. Sometimes he could draw 5 pages a day. That does not make sense to me anymore, because he drew well. The Creators' Bill of Rights was these things about getting insurance, getting protected from their jobs. If they actually had an opinion that differed from their editor, they wanted to be able to hold on to their job. They wanted to be protected so that they weren't suffering in silence, like some of the Golden Age writers and artists were, like Bill Finger or the Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Like, they didn't want to be those guys in shoes, so they decided they wanted the Creators' Bill of Rights. However, nobody directly took on the Creators' Bill of Rights like publisher-wise. It was a nice idea. independent comics. Independent comics is the natural successor to underground comics. Underground comics was a very local, very counterculture event in which people were drawing and writing the way that they couldn't draw and write in a mainstream book. They couldn't draw the way they were drawing. Like the stories that they were drawing, they were just too wild, to in your face. Independent comics, however, evolved through the underground publishers becoming more legitimate. These guys that would be contacting artists and whatnot and paying almost the same rates as DC and Marvel for fan work. Like, they would make their own books. They would pay the writers and artists to make books that they wanted to see. So you have this fan community that's getting into the business themselves, and then you have these cartoonists and authors and writers and artists that are unfulfilled with the current medium, and they draw their own stuff for themselves and publish it through these newfound publishers. Dan Clues, those Hernandez brothers. You have just so many people that are popping up that are different, that they are different. Like Mouse was an independent work. The independent scene, however, almost immediately expanded to superheroes because in 1992, Image Comics formed. And Image Comics was formed by 7 artists that left Marvel Comics over dispute with basically their right to the profits. Because the 7 artists were Jim Valentino, Jim Lee, Eric Rob Liefeld, Will Spertatio, Eric Larson, Todd McFarlane, and Mark Silvestri. Those 7 guys were the ones that formed Image Comics because Marvel was licensing their work, their artwork, and they weren't seeing a cut of the profits other than probably what they had agreed upon in contracts. However, their work was making Marvel so much more money than they saw a cut of. So they formed Image Comics, which was basically 7 studios, or six studios that would have their own editors-in-chief, and that would not interfere with any other studio. And people could submit their stuff to be published by them, and they would go out and promote their stuff, and they wouldn't own it, but they would publish it, and the creators who brought it to them would benefit the most. Now, the main thing about independent comics is that it has grown over time to include a lot of other works besides Image Comics and regular underground leftovers, to the point where like anything that isn't superheroes like can be published. Drawn and Quarterly, for example, publishes a good number of things, ranging from Dan Clues to Adrian Tomine to reprints of older work. Fantagraphics is very similar, as is Dark Horse. manga first lands in America through the efforts of a range of people, most notably the people who imported the movie Akira. Akira was based on Katsuhiro Otomo's same title manga, and it was released in 1988, and it was an amazing movie that was part of the launch of the American manga anime market. Famous creators who've had a hand in manga in the 80s include Frank Miller, who painted the covers to Lone Wolf and Cub when it was first brought over to the U.S., and he also used manga style storytelling in books like Ronin. Adam Warren actually contacted the original mangaka of Dirty Pair and asked for permission to make his own series that's his own adaptation of his characters, and he got permission to do it, and he went on to make Dirty Pair as well. The manga industry was small. However, Marvel Comics' Epic line actually had a colorized left to right version of Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira, and Katsuhiro Otomo actually handpicked the colorist for the book, and it was the first digital colorist ever used on a Marvel book. The manga industry has actually grown leaps and bounds to the point where it is one of the most dominating forces in female readership.